Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 6 entitled God's Plan. And our key idea this week is God can use any means he chooses to accomplish his will. And we are in Numbers chapter 22, verse 22 through 35. We're going to start off by asking the question, when have you been skeptical about someone's claim to speak for God and why? I have been skeptical of someone's claim to speak for God when I was working at Taco Bell. This was before I was in any kind of church employment. This was just after, so this was after college and just before I was hired on at First Baptist Avenger. I was 23 years old. Yep, I would have been 23 years old. This is my first job out of college. I was working as a shift manager at Taco Bell, and I was a closing manager. So I was often at Taco Bell closing up most nights. I would say 4 of the 7 nights of the week, and I got 2 nights off. So 4 of my 5 days that I was working, I was a closing manager. I was there till 2 or 3 in the morning, depending on the time of the year. And so one night we had a man come in, and we usually close the lobby, the dining room side of things about 11:30 or 12, and then everything else was just drive through from the last few hours of the evening. So anyway, toward the end of the night, and this man comes by our store, by our restaurant, and he is holding a Bible outside of our drive-through line and is yelling at every car that is leaving, "Repent, for the kingdom of God is near. You're going to hell if you do this." Yada yada yada, spouting just hateful things. He was being very very crass, very rude, and we got kind of annoyed with him because he was holding up our line in our drive-through line, because he was standing in the way of people's cars. And so I went out and said, "Sir, are you hungry? You can come inside and we'll get you an order." And he said, or I had the ability as a manager to pay for an order if I wanted to as my own meal. I may have offered that to him. I don't remember the details around that, but I did invite him to come inside to stop holding up progress through our drive-through line. Again, this is like 11 o'clock, 11:15-ish. It's not quite lobby closing time, but getting close. So anyway, in the lobby, there was a family with a couple of young kids, and so this gentleman who I invited inside, he came and he sat down on one side of the restaurant, and this family with their 2 kids, it's late. I think it was just after a football game or something. I mean, it was late for these 2 young kids to be not in bed yet, but I think it was the beginning of the weekend. So it was fine. It made sense. So anyway, they were all eating, and the kids were running around, being rambunctious, as kids are, especially when they're up past their bedtime. Wasn't bothering me. But the father of that family came up to my counter and told me that this man that I had invited inside out of the drive-through had begun cursing at his kids because of their rambunctious actions. And I said, "Okay, I'll speak to him. Thank you for letting me know." So I went over to the guy and said, "Hey, I told you could come in here and sit, but you can't be cussing at people." And he proceeded to tell me that he was an apostle and he spoke for God, and was using just some of the foulest language I have ever heard. And I said, "Sir, I understand all that, but you cannot use that kind of language in this store in a public place around families and little kids. It's just not polite. So please stop." And he told me that he didn't say anything that didn't occur in between the two covers of his Bible. And I looked at him very calmly, very firmly but kindly, said to him, "Sir, the F word is nowhere between the two covers of that Bible. I have read the Bible from cover to cover multiple times. That word is not in there." And he proceeded to just let me have it, speaking for God, but not speaking for God. So I was very skeptical of that claim. And so we are going to see a story today of how God speaks through an unlikely character. If you know this story, if you know the names of Balak and Balaam, then you will remember this story. So just a little bit of context. We are following the Israelites through the wilderness, and there is a kingdom between the Israelites and the promised land of Canaan. And this is the Moabite kingdom. And the Moabite king was named Balak. And Balak was intimidated by the number of Israelites, so he sent a man by the name of Balaam to go and meet them. He wanted Balaam to meet the Israelites and curse them so that they could not defeat the Moabites. So we are on the threshold of Canaan, and they have to defeat the Moabites to get into Canaan. So we're 40 years after our last lesson here. So the Moabites come from Abraham's nephew Lot. It's the children of one of his daughters that he fathered. If you want to go back and read that in the book of Genesis, feel free. But the Moabites descend from Lot through one of his daughters. And so we pick up with Balaam riding toward the Israelites, going to meet them in order to curse them so that they could not defeat Balak and the Moabites and be able to enter the promised land of Canaan. So there, verse 22. But God was incensed that Balaam was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand on the path to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off the path and went into the field. She was going around him. So Balaam hit her to return to the path. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards with a stone wall on either side. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord and pressed herself against the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it. So he hit her again. The angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam. She sat down. She knelt down and got on the ground. So he became furious and beat the donkey with his stick. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth. If you've ever seen the movie Shrek, all I can picture is Eddie Murphy's voice. I know this is a female donkey, but I can just picture Eddie Murphy's voice going, "Stop beating me. I'm a flying, talking donkey." And she asked Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times?" Balaam answered the donkey, "You made me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you now." But the donkey said, "Am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before?" "No," he replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. Balaam knelt low and bowed in worship on his face. The angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came to oppose you, and because I consider what you are doing to be evil. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the path to confront me. And now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back." So if what I'm doing, me going to curse Israel is evil in your sight, angel of the Lord, I will turn back and go back to the Moabites. And then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you." So Balaam went back to Balak's officials. So our first section, this is obstacles met. This is verses 22 through 27. We see 3 obstacles, 3 times that the donkey stopped or turned away from the path that Balaam was trying to push her. Verse 22. But God was incensed. He had this idea. He knew that Balaam was going to go. He was aware of it. Nothing is hidden from the Lord. He knew that Balaam was heading toward the Israelites. So Balaam was a non-Israelite prophet from Mesopotamia. An ancient inscription about him suggests that he was well known internationally as a seer and who could speak for various gods. That's all, here and there. The Bible calls him a diviner or a soothsayer. We would call this a witch or a warlock, somebody who tries to tell the future by conversing with the spirits. And we know that that is an abomination before the Lord, and he detests that kind of thing. He doesn't like witchcraft. And so, this man named Balaam is doing something evil. He is an evil person communicating mostly, probably, with demons. Verse 23. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with a drawn sword in his hand, she turned off this path and went into the field. So Balaam hit her to return to the path. To return her to the path. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards and a stone wall on either side. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord pressed against herself of the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it, so he hit her once again. Then the angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam, so he became furious with her and beat her with his stick. So why do you think we see this, that there are 3 times that there are obstacles in Balaam's way, and yet when the donkey turns to dodge the obstacle, because she can see the angel of the Lord, and she's trying to save her own skin and not go see this guy that's bright and has a sword in his hand. She's not trying to get close to him, and she's scared, so she turns away, or she stops, or she scrapes Balaam's foot. There's these 3 times that Balaam is stopped from his path, and yet he keeps going. So why do you think that God lets us set out on the path to begin with? If he's going to put obstacles in our way, why does he allow us to set out? Notice, he knew that Balaam was going to go toward Israel. He knew that was going to happen. He was fully aware of it. Why didn't he just kill him, strike him down, stop him then? Well, because there was another purpose. If you go down to verse 35, there's a better purpose for Balaam than just killing him right then and there. So why do you think God lets us set out on a path knowing he's going to change it along the way? I think this is something that we as Americans, I would say maybe those of us in a Western society in general, we often think incorrectly about God's plans for our lives. We think of our plans as being very linear. I do A, which takes me to B, which takes me to C. And if C is my ultimate goal, then I make a new goal for the next thing I want to do after C. But God's plans for our life are much more interconnected with one another, with our families, with other decisions that other people have made that we have maybe never met. And all of this leads up to point to a central will of God, that God is accomplishing his perfect will through all of our interactions. And so sometimes the path that God sets us on isn't linear. Sometimes there's backtracking. Sometimes there are completely different side branches that branch off and go in opposite directions, and we don't know what they're for until later on down the road. You may never understand why your GPS takes you a different way to get to work, to a ball game, to Dallas for shopping or what have you, and you have to go down a different side road. You may not know why that happens until you get to your destination. It might be because there was a bad wreck. I remember being a child and being upset that there was somebody driving slowly in front of us. As my mother was driving, somebody else was driving in front of us slowly. And I said, oh my gosh, I wish we could just get around this person. And my mom, just displaying the most patience I think I've ever seen, just that motherly patience that is sometimes there. Mom, if you're watching this, I love you. You're not always the most patient. Anyway, but that motherly patience that my mom could have, she said, Christopher, there might be a reason that this person's driving slowly in front of us. That might be God keeping us from getting into an accident. And so if we sped around them, that could put us in danger. So we're going to stay behind this car. We're going 10 miles under the speed limit. It's not that big of a deal. We're only going from Mount Vernon out to the lake or whatever. And so I said, okay. And I think about that when someone is slow in front of me. I try not to default to, oh my gosh, get out of my way. I try not to default to swerving around them and getting on my merry way. or yelling or being upset or frustrated or anything like that, because it's an obstacle, and I don't know why that obstacle's there. Now, in life, obstacles are often a lot bigger than just a car not driving very quickly in front of us. It could be a death of a loved one, a sudden death of a loved one. It could be a sudden sickness that we have for no apparent reason. It could be a car breaking down, a major financial disaster, something along those lines where we go, God, why would you allow this to happen? Why would this happen to me? And until the lesson is over, we don't understand it. But it's only in looking backward that we can go, oh, this is what God was trying to teach me. Sorry, I noticed some dust and it was bothering me. So there have been times in my life where I have, I've felt really good. And I think I've talked about this before. I felt really good about my savings. I've saved up some money. I'm going to use it to go somewhere or buy something for myself. And then flat tire. You have to get a new tire. That's, $150, for the tire and replacement and everything like that. Or an alternator goes out, and then an alternator goes out the next year, then an alternator goes out the next year, all in the same car within 3 years. Or, there's so many things. And I could talk about, what's happened this year and everything else. But God is using that for a reason, to teach me that He is going to provide in all things and through all things. He is faithful to provide. And I need to be faithful to be obedient to Him so that He doesn't remove the protection that He has given me for my life and for my family. To discipline me for being disobedient. But so I've gotten it in my mind where, I have the savings, I can pay for this, but God, why am I did so well. I've been doing so well. I've been a good steward of the money you've given me, and I'm saving up for the future. I'm trying to be wise with it. Why would you cause something to happen that would drain my savings account? Why would you allow something to happen that would drain my savings account? Well, I think my frame of thinking is wrong, and I'm, instead of thinking about why I had the money in the first place, might have been to pay for that thing that God knew was going to happen. And so he was orchestrating the saving the money to provide for me whenever I got to that rough spot, whatever it may have been. And that's true for all of us. And I think it's a good frame of mind to have, is to say that since all things are God's anyway, that when we have to spend some money, we're spending God's money for God's purposes. And I think that's the way we should think about things. So then our second section is attention gained. Finally, Balaam has his attention's been grabbed by the Lord, by his donkey. Verse 28, then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she asked Balaam, what have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times? Donkeys can't speak normally, and this is actually only one of only 2 animals that speak in God's word. The other one is Satan as a serpent. So Satan, the serpent, speaks Satan's words to Adam and Eve, and now here in verse 28, the donkey is speaking the Lord's words to, its own words, but because of the Lord, to Balaam. So she asked Balaam, what have I done to you that you've beaten me these 3 times? Balaam answered the donkey, you have made me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I would kill you now. But the donkey said, am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life? Why don't you trust me? Have I ever treated you this way before? No, he replied. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. Balaam knelt low and bowed in worship on his face. So in his anger, there in verse 29, instead of going, oh my gosh, talking donkey, he just started yelling back at the donkey angrily. He didn't even click to him that he was arguing with an animal, with an animal that doesn't have sentience. And so he just goes back to arguing with the donkey. And so now that he knows that the donkey had stopped, and now that he knows that the donkey can speak and has been stopping on purpose, God then opens Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord, because Balaam was unaware of what had stopped beforehand until this happened. And so Balaam knelt low and bowed in worship on his face. So when has an unusual experience, I would consider this unusual, led you to seek God more intentionally? I don't really have a super great example of this. Normally I have a good example for this. So think of a time where you've had an unusual experience that led you to seek God more intentionally. And while you think about that and answer that amongst yourselves, finally, God's plan, verses 32 through 35. The angel of the Lord asked him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came out to oppose you because I consider what you are doing to be evil. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live. Let the donkey live." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know you were standing in the path to confront me. And now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back." Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you." So there was a message that was devised by Balaam. A message devised by Balaam could be swayed by money, but God would not allow that to happen. Balak wanted a curse, but God would only allow a blessing. He could fill Balaam's mouth as he had filled the donkey's mouth before. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. So what benefits or outcomes can we anticipate when we seek to follow God's plans? God always, always, always blesses obedience. He never curses obedience. He always blesses it. It's always good. It's always good to be obedient to the Lord. And so when you're obedient to the Lord, you can survive with your life, as Balaam does here. When you're obedient to the Lord, he can protect you from sickness. He can protect you from division. He can protect you from the devil and the devil's schemes. And so it's a good thing. It's a benefit of you to do what God seeks and asks of you when he seeks and asks it of you. Take up your cross and follow me is the request of the Lord Jesus. If anyone wants to follow me, he must pick up his cross daily and follow me. That's what Jesus says. And when we follow God's plans, and God's plans in our life it's varied and different for every single person, but it ultimately comes down to, are you following the Lord? Are you trusting the Lord? And are you being a good steward with what God has given you? Your money, your time, your property, your family, your talents. What is it God has given you? And what are you doing to make sure you're investing in the kingdom, to make sure that the kingdom is growing and healthy and vibrant, thriving? All of those good words about growth. So thank you for being with me today. I look forward to worshiping with you very soon. Bye-bye.